The relationship between the United States and Iran represents one of the most dramatic transformations in modern diplomatic history, evolving from close partnership to bitter adversaries over the span of 7 decades. This story begins not with conflict but with cooperation. In the early 20th century, America was viewed favorably in Iran, largely because it had no colonial ambitions in the region, unlike Britain and Russia, who had long interfered in Iranian affairs. The relationship grew closer after World War II, when Iran became a strategic partner in the emerging Cold War. However, the seeds of future conflict were planted in 1953, during a pivotal moment that would echo through decades, when Iranian Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh nationalized the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, threatening Western oil interests. The CIA orchestrated Operation Ajax, a covert coup that overthrew the democratically elected leader and consolidated power under Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. While this secured American influence in the short term, it created deep resentment among Iranians, who saw it as a violation of their sovereignty. For the next 25 years, the Shah ruled as an authoritarian monarch while maintaining close ties with Washington. Iran became America's policeman in the Persian Gulf, receiving billions in military aid and advanced weapons. The Shah's modernization programs transformed Iran's economy and infrastructure, but his secret police, SAVAK, brutally suppressed dissent, and the gap between rich and poor widened dramatically. The turning point came in 1979 with the Iranian Revolution. Millions of Iranians, led by Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, overthrew the Shah in a popular uprising that established an Islamic republic. The revolution was fueled by decades of accumulated grievances, including the 1953 coup, the Shah's authoritarianism. October 1979, Iranian students stormed the American embassy in Tehran, taking 52 Americans hostage. This crisis, which lasted 444 days, defined the new relationship between the two nations. American television screens showed nightly images of blindfolded hostages and chanting crowds burning American flags. When Iraq's Saddam Hussein invaded Iran in 1980, starting a devastating 8-year war, the United States initially supported Iraq, providing intelligence and economic aid, despite Iraq's use of chemical weapons against Iranian troops and civilians. This war killed an estimated 500,000 to 1 million people and devastated Iran's economy. The conflict also saw America directly engage Iranian forces during the Tanker War, when U.S. Navy ships protected Kuwaiti oil tankers from Iranian attack. In 1988, the USS Vincennes mistakenly shot down Iran Air Flight 655, killing all 290 passengers and crew, an incident that further poisoned relations. President Mohammad Khatami, elected in 1997, called for a dialogue of civilizations with the West. The nuclear issue became the central flashpoint in the 21st century. Iran had begun developing nuclear technology in the 1950s with American assistance under the Atoms for Peace program. After the revolution, the program was suspended but later restarted. By 2002, the international community learned Iran had been secretly constructing nuclear facilities, including an enrichment plant at Natanz. Iran insisted its program was for peaceful energy purposes, but the United States and its allies feared Iran was pursuing nuclear weapons capability. This launched a cycle of escalation. Sanctions expanded dramatically in the 2000s. United States implemented increasingly, targeting Iran's central bank, oil exports, and access to the international financial system. The European Union joined with its own sanctions on Iranian oil and financial sectors. By 2012, these measures had caused Iran's currency to collapse, inflation to skyrocket, and ordinary Iranians faced shortages of food, medicine, and basic goods. Iran's oil exports, which had reached 2.5 million barrels per day before sanctions, plummeted to around 1 million. The sanctions hit the middle class particularly hard, creating a humanitarian toll that became a point of moral debate. When Hassan Rouhani was elected president on a platform of ending Iran's isolation, this opened the door to serious negotiations between Iran and the P5+1 group, the United States, United Kingdom, France, Russia, China, and Germany. After years of intensive diplomacy, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of action was signed in July 2015. Under this agreement, Iran agreed to strict limitations on its nuclear program, including reducing its uranium stockpile by 98%, limiting enrichment levels, allowing unprecedented international inspections, and redesigning its heavy water reactor to prevent plutonium production. In exchange, international sanctions would be lifted. The International Atomic Energy Agency repeatedly verified that Iran was complying with the deal's terms. However, the agreement remained controversial, particularly in the United States' ballistic missile program, and didn't constrain Iran's regional activities, including support for groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, and the Assad regime in Syria. In May 2018, President Donald Trump withdrew the United States, calling it the worst deal ever, negotiated, and reimposed sanctions under a policy of maximum pressure, enriching uranium to higher levels, and installing advanced centrifuges. By 2020, the nuclear program had expanded beyond pre-deal levels. The Trump administration also increased military pressure. In January 2020, a U.S. drone strike killed Qasem Soleimani, commander of Iran's elite Quds force at Baghdad airport. Iran retaliated by launching ballistic missiles at American bases in Iraq. Today, the relationship remains at an impasse. Iran's economy continues to suffer under sanctions, with the Iranian rial having lost approximately 90% of its value since 2018, with sanctions complicating access to medical supplies and vaccines. Domestically, frustration with the economic situation has led to periodic protests, which the government has suppressed, sometimes violently. The 2022 protests following the death of Mahsa Amini in police custody represented the most serious challenge. By late 2023, Iran had enriched uranium to 60% purity, close to the 90% needed for weapons-grade material. Meanwhile, Iran has expanded its regional influence, supporting allied militias across the Middle East, developing sophisticated drone and missile technology, and deepening ties with Russia and China as a counterbalance to Western pressure. Indirect negotiations between the United States and Iran, mediated by European powers, have come close to agreement but ultimately failed due to disputes over the fundamental trust deficit remains the greatest obstacle, each side doubting the other's intentions and willingness to follow through on agreements. The future remains uncertain. Some analysts believe that sustained pressure will eventually force Iran to negotiate. Over the past 2 weeks, Iran has faced its most significant internal challenge in years as nationwide protests sparked by economic despair have evolved into a direct confrontation with the Islamic Republic's authority. What began in late December as demonstrations in Tehran's bazaars over soaring prices has spread to more than 180 cities and towns across the country. CNN, with protesters chanting and directly challenging the regime, has responded with brutal force while simultaneously cutting off internet and phone access to the outside world, creating an unprecedented information blackout that has lasted for days. The death toll remains disputed and deeply concerning. Human rights groups allege the death toll has risen to 648. Trump wrote on his Truth social platform warning Iran that if it violently kills peaceful protesters, the United States will come to their rescue, adding, "We are locked and loaded and ready to go." OPB. These threats have only intensified as the violence escalated. Trump warned he may still carry out strikes against the Islamic Republic over its violent crackdown, telling reporters if they do that, we will hit them at levels that they've never been hit before.